So we talked about random samples in the last section, but a convenience sample is probably what most of us have actually called random samples up to this point. And a convenience sample is a non-probability sample in which the researcher requests volunteers from a group of people who meet the general requirements of the study. So an example of this might be, just imagine that you're doing your first research project and you want to understand how students choose their major. So since you're enrolled at Southeastern, you are going to do your study there. So if the university has roughly 3,000 students, and I don't really know how many they have, then these 3,000 students would be our population, and we refer to the population as a capital N. And each of these 3,000 students is considered a unit. And there's some other terms for it, but unit is the most common. And so in order to select a sample, which we're going to refer to as a small n when you do that formula, of students from this population of 3,000 students, we could choose to use a convenience sample. And what I mean by that is, since you don't have time to ask everybody and you don't have access to the information that you would need to make sure you had a truly random sample, particularly to do the stratified sample, you decide to use a convenience sample of 300 students. And a convenience sample is simply one where the units of the population that are selected for inclusion are the easiest to access. So this is very different than the probability sampling techniques where the selection of units is made randomly. In convenience sampling, it's all about easy access. So we just want 300 students, and we don't care if they're all from the same dorm or have the same major, as long as they all go to Southeastern, right? So we might just stand outside our dorm or outside the student center and try to get students to participate in our research until we've talked 300 of them into participating, and that would be our sample. And the reason that you might use convenience sampling instead of probability sampling techniques is because they're so much easier and so much more cost effective. And for some kinds of research, they would probably be not a bad sample, especially when you're looking at the cost of, and another thing you might not, in fact, you probably would not have access to the information that you would need to make sure your sample was truly random. So the disadvantages are that these samples almost always suffer from biases. They can lead to the underrepresentation or the overrepresentation of particular groups within the sample. So if you stood outside your dorm, or if you stood outside a psychology class, then that would probably, with the psychology class, you could probably assume that you were going to have a higher number of psychology students coming out those doors than you would chemistry students, perhaps. So there is some ways that could either be an underrepresentation or overrepresentation of a particular group within the sample. So it wouldn't necessarily be representative of the population being studied. And this undermines your ability to make generalizations from your sample to the population that you're studying. And some of the information that we've used in this was taken from large dissertations, and some of it was taken from Professor Blythe-Duell.